You think you're being patient. You think you're being understanding. You think staying calm and letting things slide makes you look strong. But what if that's exactly why she's starting to lose respect for you? Because from her perspective, every time you tolerate something that crosses a line, you're not being strong. You're lowering your standard. And once she senses that your standards don't have consequences, something shifts. She stops adjusting to you. You start adjusting to her. And that's where you lose control of the entire dynamic. Most men don't even realize they're doing this. In this video, I'll show you the exact behaviors that quietly destroy respect and how high-value men handle them differently. This isn't about controlling women. It's about controlling what you allow. If you want to understand how attraction and respect actually work, hit like and subscribe. Now let's break this down from the root. Why tolerance is where respect begins to die. Respect is not built on what you say. It's built on what you allow. You can tell a woman, "I don't like that." You can explain your standards. You can even believe deep down that you deserve better. But none of that matters if your behavior contradicts your words, because people don't listen to what you say. They watch what you tolerate. Every relationship has moments where lines get tested, sometimes intentionally, sometimes unconsciously. A dismissive comment, a cancelled plan, a subtle lack of consideration. On their own, these moments seem small, almost harmless. But they're not. They are data points, and she's collecting them. She's watching how you respond, not just once, but repeatedly. And over time, a pattern forms. If you consistently let things slide, if you address something, but stay anyway, invest anyway, continue the same way, then the message she receives is simple. This behavior is acceptable. Not because you said it, but because you proved it. This is basic behavioral psychology. Actions that don't carry consequences tend to repeat. Reinforcement doesn't always come from reward. Sometimes, the absence of correction is enough. So when a boundary is crossed and nothing changes, that boundary doesn't just weaken, it disappears. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. Respect is deeply tied to perceived strength of character. When you protect your standards, you signal self-respect. And self-respect naturally commands respect from others. But when you repeatedly tolerate behavior that undermines you, a different signal is sent. One that suggests hesitation, uncertainty, even fear of loss. And whether she's aware of it or not, she adjusts to that signal. The dynamic shifts, slowly, quietly, but in a way that's very hard to reverse. Because once someone learns that your standards don't have weight, they stop taking them seriously. Standards that are not enforced are just suggestions. And suggestions don't command respect. They invite negotiation. They invite testing. And eventually, they invite disregard. So before we even talk about specific behaviors, you need to understand this foundation. You are always teaching people how to treat you. Not through what you demand, but through what you tolerate. It usually starts in a way that feels completely normal. You're the one initiating the conversations. You're planning the dates. You're checking in, making time, keeping things moving forward. And at first it feels right. You're interested, you're invested. You want to show effort. But slowly, something begins to shift. You notice she's not initiating as much. She responds, but rarely reaches out first. She shows up, but doesn't contribute in the same way. And instead of pulling back, you lean in harder. You text more. You plan more. You give more. Because in your mind, that's what a good man does. He leads. He invests. He shows consistency. But here's the part most men don't see. When effort flows only in one direction, it doesn't make you more valuable. It makes your effort predictable. And predictability kills emotional tension. Attraction isn't built on certainty alone. It's built on the balance between interest and uncertainty, between giving and receiving, when she knows, without a doubt, that you will always be there, always initiate, always carry the interaction. Your presence stops feeling earned. It starts feeling guaranteed. And the moment something becomes guaranteed, its perceived value drops. This is a principle you see everywhere. Scarcity creates value. Effort creates meaning. But when something is always available, regardless of how little is given in return, it loses its edge. And that's exactly what happens here. What began as genuine interest slowly turns into a one-sided dynamic. And without realizing it, you shift roles. From someone she's excited about, to someone she expects. From someone she invests in, to someone who provides. And once that shift happens, respect starts to erode. Not because she's trying to use you, but because she's adapting to the structure you created. You taught her that your attention doesn't need to be earned. So she stopped earning it. High-value men understand this early. They don't confuse generosity with overinvestment. They don't reward low effort with more effort. When they notice that energy isn't being reciprocated, they don't double down. They pause. They give space. They step back just enough to see if the other person steps forward. And if she doesn't, they don't chase. They don't try harder to prove their worth. They reassess. Because they understand something most men ignore. The more you give when she gives nothing, the less your giving means. Effort only has value when it's mutual. And the moment it stops being mutual, continuing to pour into it doesn't build attraction. It slowly destroys it. A lot of men say they have boundaries. Very few actually enforce them. And that difference is everything. Because a boundary is not something you say. It's something you back up with action. You can tell a woman, "I don't like last-minute cancellations." You can express frustration when she disrespects your time. But if she cancels on you, and you still rearrange your schedule, still show up the next time without hesitation, still treat her the same way, then that wasn't a boundary. That was a preference. And preferences don't carry consequences, so they don't carry weight. This is how it usually plays out. The first time she crosses a line, you let it slide. Maybe you don't want to overreact. Maybe you tell yourself it's not a big deal. The second time, you notice it more. You might even bring it up, calmly, politely, but then nothing changes, and neither do you. You keep investing. You keep showing up. You keep accepting behavior that clearly doesn't align with your standards. And without realizing it, you've just taught her something very important. Your boundaries are flexible, negotiable, optional, because if they weren't, your behavior would reflect that. Every time a boundary is crossed and nothing happens, the line moves, just a little. And over time, those small shifts add up. Until one day, you look at the dynamic and realize you've lost control of it completely. But here's the uncomfortable truth most men avoid. You didn't lose control. You gave it away. Not all at once, but piece by piece. Every time you chose comfort over clarity. Every time you avoided friction instead of reinforcing your standard. This is basic conditioning. Behavior that isn't corrected becomes normalized. So if she cancels and you accept it, it becomes normal. If she disrespects your time and you tolerate it, it becomes expected. And once something becomes expected, it stops being questioned. High-value men don't need to be aggressive to enforce boundaries. They're calm, direct, clear. When a line is crossed, they address it once, and then they watch. If the behavior changes, they continue. If it doesn't, they adjust their investment. They don't reward inconsistency. They don't ignore patterns. And most importantly, they don't stay in situations that repeatedly violate their standards. Because they understand something simple but powerful. Boundaries only exist when they cost something. If there's no consequence, there is no boundary. And when your boundaries don't exist, neither does your leverage. Pay attention to how she speaks to you. Not when things are perfect, not when she's in a good mood, but in the small, unguarded moments. The sarcasm, the eye roll, the subtle interruption when you're talking, the joke at your expense when other people are around. None of these things look dramatic on their own, but together they tell you exactly where you stand. Because communication is not just words, it's positioning. The way someone speaks to you reveals how they see you. And when disrespect starts to show up in the way she talks to you, it's not random, it's a shift in perception. The problem is, most men tolerate this. They tell themselves they're being calm, mature, unbothered. They don't want to seem controlling. They don't want to create unnecessary conflict. So they ignore it. They laugh it off. They let it slide. They stay silent. But silence is not neutrality. Silence is permission. Research from the Gottman Institute has shown that patterns like contempt, criticism, and dismissiveness are some of the strongest predictors of relationship breakdown. Not because of one big moment, but because of repeated, uncorrected behavior over time. And that's exactly how it starts. Small comments, subtle tone shifts, moments where your input is brushed aside. If those moments are not addressed, they don't disappear. They compound. And over time, the emotional tone of the relationship changes. What used to feel like mutual respect starts to feel like imbalance. What used to feel like partnership starts to feel like hierarchy. And in that hierarchy, you're no longer on equal ground. Here's the hard truth. If she can speak down to you, she has already placed herself above you. Not because she decided to dominate you, but because you allowed the dynamic to move in that direction. High-value men don't overreact in these situations. They don't explode. They don't escalate unnecessarily. But they also don't ignore it. They address it immediately, calmly, clearly. Something as simple as, "I don't appreciate being spoken to like that." No anger, no drama, just clarity. And that clarity does something powerful. It resets the tone. It communicates that respect is not optional. It's expected. And when that expectation is enforced early, consistently, the relationship adjusts. Because people rise or fall to the standard you maintain. And if you don't maintain one, the default is always lower than you think. This is where things get even more subtle and far more dangerous. Because emotional games don't always look like disrespect. They look like confusion. One day she's warm, engaged, present. The next, she's distant, unavailable, hard to read. She disappears, then comes back with affection. She cancels, then apologizes just enough to keep you hooked. And you tell yourself it's normal. She's just busy. She's going through something. Maybe I just need to be more patient. So you lean in again. You text more. You try harder. You invest more energy trying to get back to how things felt before. But what you don't realize is this. You're not stabilizing the situation. You're reinforcing it. Every time you respond to inconsistency with more effort, you reward the very behavior that's destabilizing the connection. And from a psychological standpoint, this pattern is incredibly powerful. It's called intermittent reinforcement. When attention and affection are given unpredictably, the brain releases more dopamine than it does with consistent rewards. It creates a loop, uncertainty followed by relief, that keeps you emotionally hooked. That's why you feel pulled in, even when things don't feel right. But here's the cost. The more you chase clarity, the more you lose control. Because now she's not responding to you. You're responding to her. She sets the rhythm. She controls the pace. She decides when connection happens and when it disappears. And over time, that imbalance becomes the dynamic. Not because she consciously planned it, but because you adapted to it. and adaptation, without awareness, always leads to loss of leverage. High-value men recognize this pattern early. They don't try to decode mixed signals. They don't chase inconsistency. And they don't reward behavior that lacks clarity. When things become unpredictable, they don't lean in, they step back. Not out of ego, not out of pride, but out of understanding. Because attention has value. And value is only maintained when it's not given away in response to instability. Now, this doesn't mean every inconsistency is a game. People have lives, responsibilities, off days. But there's a difference between occasional fluctuation and a pattern that keeps you off balance. And if you ignore that pattern, if you keep chasing instead of observing, then you're not just participating in the game, you're funding it. Every time you chase confusion, you reward it. And the moment you stop rewarding it is the moment the game loses its power. By now, you've probably noticed something. None of this is really about her. It's about how you respond. Because the same behaviors, low effort, boundary testing, disrespect, inconsistency, show up in almost every modern dating dynamic. The difference is not what happens. The difference is what you tolerate. High-value men don't try to control women. They control their standards. And more importantly, they act in alignment with them. They don't chase when effort isn't reciprocated. They don't overinvest to compensate for imbalance. They don't ignore patterns hoping things will magically improve. They observe first. They pay attention to behavior over time. And then they make decisions based on clarity, not emotion. If she shows up with consistency, they invest. If she doesn't, they pull back. No drama, no speeches, no need to prove anything. Just adjustment. Because they understand that their time, attention, and presence are not things to be given away freely. They are things to be exchanged. And that mindset changes everything. When you stop reacting impulsively and start responding intentionally, the entire dynamic shifts. You're no longer trying to win her approval. You're evaluating whether she aligns with your standards. That shift alone restores balance. It brings you back to center. Because self-respect is not something you demand from others. It's something you demonstrate through your actions. And once that foundation is in place, something interesting happens. People begin to treat you differently, not because you ask them to, but because your behavior no longer allows anything less. Your presence only has value when it can be withdrawn. And when you truly understand that, you stop holding on to situations that slowly diminish you. You choose differently. You respond differently. And as a result, everything around you changes. At this point, you need to understand something clearly. It's not that women suddenly wake up one day and decide to lose respect for you. It happens gradually, quietly, through patterns you allowed more than once. Because respect is not something you ask for. It's something that forms based on what you consistently tolerate. Every ignored red flag, every unaddressed behavior, every time you chose comfort over clarity, it all adds up. And eventually, the dynamic shifts. Not because she changed, but because you showed her, through your actions, what was acceptable. That's the part most men don't want to face. It's easier to blame her behavior than to examine your response to it. But the moment you take responsibility for what you allow is the moment you take back control. Because now, the power is no longer external. It's in your standards. It's in your decisions. It's in your willingness to walk away from anything that doesn't align with how you expect to be treated. If you continue to tolerate what diminishes you, you will continue to be treated that way. But if you raise your standards, and more importantly, enforce them, everything changes. The dynamic changes. The energy changes. The way people show up around you changes. Because you changed. You don't get the respect you deserve. You get the respect you tolerate. If this made you see things differently, subscribe for more insights on female psychology and relationship dynamics. And tell me in the comments, what's one behavior you've been tolerating that you know you need to stop? Share this with someone who needs to hear it, because sometimes the truth is uncomfortable, but it's exactly what sets you free.